Welcome back to Silk Warrant. Today in this story is about the moment an IT analyst faced the man who erased her and revealed she had been watching everything.
The deposition room smelled like old coffee and fresh panic. I was the one who put him there. His lawyer kept clicking a pen. 3 clicks, pause, 3 clicks. The same rhythm he used every time Marcus Hale thought he'd already won something. I sat across the table with my hands folded, a single USB drive on the table in front of me, and I thought, he still doesn't know my last name. That drive had a label on it, 3 letters. His initials. Let me take you back 6 years to the day I became invisible. My name is Caroline Voss. I was hired as a senior IT systems analyst at Hale Capital Group in the spring, not as a secretary, not as an assistant, but as the woman who would spend the next 6 years quietly building the digital spine of a $200 million financial advisory firm. I wore blazers. I carried credentials. I had a master's degree in information systems from a university Marcus Hale had definitely heard of because he donated a building to it. None of that mattered the first time I walked into the executive floor to install a server update. Marcus Hale looked up from his glass desk, looked past me, and said to his assistant, "Tell it we still need someone up here." I was standing 4 feet away. His assistant, Dana, caught my eye. She said nothing. She was good at that. I finished the update. I left. And I made a decision that afternoon that I didn't tell anyone, not my supervisor, not my one work friend Jenna, not my mother. I started keeping a log, not for any reason I could have articulated back then, just a habit. Just a woman in a room full of people who decided she wasn't worth remembering, deciding that she would be the one doing the remembering. The first thing you need to understand about Hale Capital Group is that it ran on 2 systems. The official one, clean, compliant, audited quarterly by a firm Marcus played golf with. And the one underneath it. The one I found by accident in my 3rd month on the job when I was tracing a network anomaly, and followed a thread to a partitioned drive that wasn't listed in any of our infrastructure. Documentation. I didn't touch it, I documented it. Date, time, file path, size, last access timestamp. I put it in my log, flagged it internally as legacy partition, origin unclear, and I moved on. Because here's what 6 years in corporate IT teaches you. When you find something you weren't supposed to find, the worst thing you can do is announce it. The second worst thing is ignore it. The right thing, the patient, precise, invisible thing is to watch it. So I watched it, for 4 more years. Marcus Hale had a tell. Everyone who worked near him long enough figured it out eventually. When he felt in control, which was most of the time, he was magnanimous. Big handshakes, first-name basis with the janitor, generous at the holiday party. But when something threatened that control, even slightly, he'd go very still and start clicking that pen. 3 clicks, pause, 3 clicks. I noticed it the first time a client questioned his returns publicly in a meeting. 3 clicks. I noticed it when the compliance officer asked him a question he deflected instead of answering. 3 clicks. I noticed it the day my direct supervisor, Greg, a man who knew my name at least, told me in a lowered voice that Marcus had asked him what the IT girl's deal was. Not my name, not my title. 3 clicks. I went home that night and added a new column to my log. The second thing you need to understand is what was actually on that partition. I won't walk you through all of it, because some of it is still under seal. What I can tell you is that, over the span of 5 years, someone, using credentials that rotated but always originated from one executive office, had been accessing and exporting client account data. Not a lot at once, never enough to trip an automated alert, just enough, regularly, to a receiving address that wasn't on any of our documented systems. I'd been tracking the pattern for 4 years when the SEC opened an investigation into Hale Capital Group for irregularities in client account management. Marcus didn't know that I knew. He also didn't know that 3 months before the investigation became public, I had printed every single log entry, every single access record, and every single timestamp, and stored them in a place that was not on Hale Capital Group servers. Jenna thought I was having a paranoid episode when I handed her a sealed envelope and asked her to keep it at her apartment. She kept it. She didn't ask what was inside. That's what real loyalty looks like. The day the SEC subpoena landed, the office felt like a building that had just heard a sound it couldn't identify. People moved slower, spoke quieter. Marcus's door, which was usually open by 9, stayed closed until noon. I was in the server room when Dana, his assistant, the one who'd watched him look through me on day 1, walked in without knocking. She stood in the doorway for a second. Then she said, "He's looking for something on the systems from 2021. A partition. He asked Greg. Greg said he'd have to ask you." I looked at her. "He doesn't know your name," she said. It wasn't a question. "I know," I said. She looked at the server rack behind me, then back at me. "He's scared." "I know that too," she left. And I sat with what she'd just handed me, which was not information about Marcus. I already had that. What she handed me was a choice. She'd walked into that room as his assistant and walked out as something else. I called my lawyer that evening. Here is something nobody tells you about being the quiet one in the room. People mistake your silence for absence. They talk in front of you the way people talk in front of furniture. And over 6 years, furniture hears everything. I heard Marcus tell his CFO that the SEC inquiry was a nuisance from a short seller with connections. I heard him tell his attorney that the partition in question had been decommissioned years ago and was inaccessible. I heard him, in his own office on a Tuesday in November, tell someone on the phone. The IT department wouldn't even know what they were looking at. I had 17 months of access logs sitting in Jenna's apartment in a sealed envelope. I had a copy of every credential rotation on that partition, time-stamped. I had buried in my original network anomaly report from year 1, the report I'd filed, that had been reviewed, stamped, and filed away by Greg without escalation. A record establishing that I had found and formally documented the partition before any investigation began. And I had done something else. Something I want you to understand was not revenge. It was not strategic in the dramatic sense. It was just the habit of a woman who had spent 6 years watching a man be careless with the things he thought no one was watching. I had saved every email, every work order, every system access request, every ticket Marcus's office had submitted to IT, which meant to me, which meant to the invisible woman who signed off on every piece of infrastructure he used to run his firm. His name was on exactly 0 of those tickets. Mine was on all of them. The deposition was scheduled for a Wednesday. I wore the same blazer I'd worn on my first day. Not symbolically, I just liked it. It fit well. It had good pockets. Marcus's legal team had spent 3 weeks trying to establish that the partition data was either inaccessible, corrupted, or misattributed, that no one with the proper expertise had reviewed it, that the chain of custody was unclear. His lead attorney, the one with the pen, had spent most of the pre-deposition maneuvering trying to ensure that the court's IT expert witness would be someone from a firm they'd worked with before. That motion had been denied. The judge had appointed an independent expert. That expert had reviewed the records. And Marcus Hale's attorney, in the 48 hours before the deposition, had apparently discovered something that caused him to file an emergency motion, requesting that a specific Hale Capital Group employee be called as a witness for the defense. Her name, spelled correctly for apparently the first time in 6 years, was on the motion. Caroline Voss, Senior IT Systems Analyst, the woman Marcus Hale had looked through on day 1. His own lawyer was asking for me. I want to tell you what the room felt like when I walked in. It smelled like old coffee and the specific anxiety of people who have run out of moves. The windows were those tall, frosted glass kind that let light in without letting you see out. The table was long. Marcus was at one end. He was clicking his pen. 3 clicks. Pause, 3 clicks. His attorney laid out their position. That I, as the original documenting analyst, could testify that the partition had been flagged as legacy and non-operational. which would support their timeline argument. He slid a copy of my Year 1 report across the table. I looked at it. I had written it. I knew every word. Then I opened my laptop, and I pulled up the full log, not just the initial report. The 4 years of subsequent access documentation, the credential rotations, the export timestamps, the receiving addresses. All of it organized by date, cross-referenced to the executive floor access badge records I had also, quietly, been maintaining. Because the badge system ran through my department and no one had ever thought to ask. I said, "Your initial report is accurate. I flagged it as legacy on first discovery. These are the 1,847 subsequent log entries documenting what occurred after that." Silence. Marcus's pen stopped. I looked at him for the first time directly, not past him, not around him, and I said, "You were right that the IT department would know what we were looking at. You were wrong about everything else. I won't describe the rest in detail. What I will tell you is that the envelope from Jenna's apartment was entered into evidence. That Dana provided a separate affidavit about conversations she had witnessed in that executive office over several years. That the pen, as far as I know, was never clicked again in any room I was in. I left Hale Capital Group 4 months after the deposition, not because I was pushed out, but because I had already accepted a position I'd been quietly pursuing since month 5 of the investigation, building the internal compliance infrastructure for a financial oversight firm. They had called me based on a referral. The referral was from the SEC's independent IT expert, who had reviewed my documentation and described it in his report as among the most methodical chain of custody records this reviewer has encountered in a decade of forensic work. On my last day at Hale Capital, I walked back through the server room one final time. It smelled like cool air and humming metal, the same as always. I turned off the light. I've thought a lot about what those 6 years actually were, not a trap I set, not a revenge I planned. Just a woman who decided that being unseen was not the same as being without record. I showed up. I documented. I stayed calm in rooms where other people were performing certainty they didn't have. I built something they couldn't find until they needed it. And here's the thing about that, the thing I want to leave you with. The most dangerous person in any room is rarely the loudest one. She's the one they forgot was keeping track. So I'll ask you this, and I want you to sit with it before you answer. The people who overlook you every single day, are they doing so because you have nothing worth seeing, or because they've never once looked hard enough to find out?